Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. The call came just after 11 a.m. I was doing laundry, folding her favorite yellow dress, the one with the tiny sunflowers. My phone rang once, twice, and I almost didn't answer. But then I saw the name of the kindergarten. I remember the way my hands went still, the way everything around me suddenly felt wrong. The voice on the line was shaking. There'd been an incident. A fire. They were evacuating. The kids were being pulled out. I didn't wait for the rest. I dropped the dress, grabbed my keys, and ran. The drive felt endless. Sirens passed me. Smoke rose in the distance like a warning. Black, angry clouds stretching up into the blue. My hands were shaking on the wheel. I kept whispering her name, like it would keep her safe, like she'd hear me. When I turned the corner and saw the school, my breath caught. Flames curled out of the windows. Firefighters shouted. Parents screamed names into the chaos. And right in the middle of it all, I saw him, my husband, stumbling out of the smoke, carrying a little girl in his arms. But it wasn't our daughter. It was someone else's child. Someone else's world. He was holding her like she was everything. I searched his eyes, desperate for an answer. My lips moved before I could think. Where is she? Where's our baby? He didn't answer. He didn't even look at me. I tried to run toward the building, but someone held me back. A firefighter, maybe. Or a stranger. I fought them. Screamed. Pointed. She's still inside. Please, my daughter's still inside. But the building groaned. A sound I will never forget. Wood and metal twisting, screaming with heat. And then a section of the roof collapsed. The smoke swallowed everything. And I knew. Right there, standing on a sidewalk that still had her chalk drawings from 2 days ago. I knew. He had made a choice. I opened my mouth to scream, but nothing came out. The world tilted sideways. Sounds became muffled, like someone had pressed a pillow over my ears. I saw flames licking the sky. I saw a little pink backpack in the dirt. I saw people moving, yelling, running, and I couldn't move. I couldn't breathe. Someone was talking to me. Paramedic, maybe. Or a teacher. I remember a hand on my shoulder. I remember the words. They tried. They really tried. I didn't hear the rest. All I could see was him. My husband. Kneeling on the pavement, holding that little girl in his lap. Rocking her. His head pressed to hers, eyes closed like he was praying or pretending he was somewhere else. He wasn't looking at me. He wasn't searching for our daughter. He wasn't asking questions or shouting her name. He had already let her go. I felt my knees buckle, but I didn't fall. My body just locked up, frozen in place. Numb and weightless, like grief had reached inside me and turned everything off. There should have been a scream. The kind that tears your throat open. The kind that rips through the air and makes the world stop. But I stood there in complete silence, watching the fire consume everything we loved. And he didn't even come to me. He stayed beside her. Elise's daughter. The girl he pulled from the smoke while our baby, our own child, burned in a room filled with storybooks and crayons. Grief doesn't come all at once. It drips in slowly, like water from a cracked ceiling, until you're soaked and don't remember when you started drowning. The first morning after the fire, I woke up in a hospital bed. I didn't remember how I got there. My clothes smelled like smoke. My throat was raw. Someone had left a cup of water on the side table untouched. The nurse came in and said she was sorry. I didn't respond. What do you say to that? Sorry isn't a word that fits inside this kind of loss. They told me I could go home once they checked my lungs, that there was no sign of damage. But they were wrong. Something inside me was scorched beyond repair. Back at home, people started showing up. Some brought casseroles. Some brought flowers. Most didn't know what to say. So they said things like, she's in a better place, or time heals all wounds. They meant well, but I wanted to scream. Because the only place she should have been was here. In her room. In my arms. The news ran the story for 3 days. Headlines called it a tragic accident. There was a photo of the school engulfed in flames. Another of my husband carrying Elise's daughter out of the smoke, her face buried in his chest. They called him a hero. Hero. The word echoed in every conversation, every article, every shallow breath I took. Strangers posted his picture online. Neighbors left notes on our porch. Thank you for your bravery. No one asked about the girl he didn't save. No one said her name. It was like she had vanished in the shadow of his glory. The town had moved on, proud of the man who saved a life. But I couldn't look at him. Not when he walked through the door. Not when he sat across from me in silence. Not when he reached out to hold my hand and I pulled away like his touch burned. We hadn't spoken since the fire. Not really. Not about her. There was too much noise from the outside world, but inside the house it was unbearably quiet. No cartoons on in the background. No tiny footsteps running down the hallway. Just two people breathing under the same roof, with nothing left to say. It was 3 days after the funeral when he finally spoke. The house still smelled like smoke. Not real smoke, not anymore. But the kind that lingers in your head long after it's gone. I hadn't slept. The bedroom felt too big. Too cold. Her room was still closed. I couldn't bring myself to open the door. He found me in the kitchen, sitting at the table in the dark. The clock said 2:17 a.m. I had made tea but hadn't touched it. The cup had gone cold. He stood in the doorway for a long time. I didn't look at him. I didn't invite him in. But he stepped forward anyway. I didn't know she was still inside, he said. His voice cracked like he wanted that to be enough. Like those words could undo the fire, the choice, the silence. I didn't answer. He sat down across from me, elbows on the table, rubbing his hands together like that would help him feel something. I watched the way he avoided my eyes. I saw the smoke. I heard the screams. I was trying to find her but... He paused, swallowing hard. But Elise's daughter was closer. Still I said nothing. I didn't think. I just moved. I saw her by the stairs crying. I grabbed her. I thought maybe someone else had. He stopped himself. We both knew what he was about to say. That he hoped someone else had saved our daughter. That he thought someone else would make the choice he couldn't. My fingers curled around the edge of the table. She was 5, I said quietly. He looked at me then. Really looked. And for the first time I saw it fear. Not from the fire. Not from what he lost. But fear of what he'd done. What he hadn't done. I didn't mean, he started. You didn't choose her, I interrupted. You saw 2 children. And you chose hers. He didn't deny it. His eyes dropped. His lips trembled. And then he whispered it. I saw her first. That was all. Not I'm sorry. Not I wish it had been different. Just that one hollow sentence. And in that moment something in me collapsed more completely than the roof of that school ever had. He used to say her name like it didn't mean anything. Just Elise. Just a girl he dated in high school. Just someone he bumped into years later at a grocery store. He told me not to worry. That they had history but no future. That he barely remembered her. But I remembered. The first time he mentioned her, it was casual, tossed into a story about old friends and forgotten neighborhoods. He laughed while saying her name a little too softly. Like the memory was warm. Like it hadn't cooled with time. And I noticed how he avoided looking at me when he said it. Elise. It always landed differently. Like the air shifted around it. Back then I ignored the twist in my stomach. I told myself it was nothing. That I was overthinking. That we all have people from the past who pop up and mean nothing anymore. That I had no reason not to trust the man I married. But now I saw it clearly. Her name was never just a name. It was the ghost that lived quietly in the corners of our marriage. In the way he never liked the nickname I gave our daughter because Elise once had the same one. In the way he changed the radio station when a certain song came on. In the way he never, not once, talked about why they broke up. And then came the birthday party. Our daughter's 4th birthday. Balloons, cupcakes, messy frosting. He was distracted all afternoon, barely smiling. I asked if something was wrong and he shook his head. Said work was stressful. Said he was tired. Later that night I saw a message on his phone. A simple happy birthday photo from Elise. Her daughter in a red dress, holding the same exact kind of cupcake we'd served. He said it was a coincidence. That she didn't know. But I never forgot the way he stared at that picture. Quiet. Distant. A smile he tried to hide curling at the edges of his mouth. And her daughter, the one he pulled from the fire, had the same eyes. The same exact shade of hazel that used to stop him mid-sentence when Elise walked into a room. I wonder now if that's what he saw in the smoke. Not a stranger's child. but the face of the woman he never really let go of. I stood outside her door for almost an hour. The hallway was quiet, too quiet, like the air itself was waiting for me to move. I rested my hand on the doorknob more times than I could count, pressed my forehead against the wood, listened for a sound that would never come. Then finally I turned it. The door creaked open, slow and soft, as if the room itself had been holding its breath. Everything was exactly as she left it. Her favorite stuffed rabbit sat on the bed, one ear bent, the fur worn thin from too many nights clutched in small arms. The nightlight in the corner was still plugged in, shaped like a star, glowing faintly as if it had forgotten she was gone. Her drawings were taped to the wall, crooked, colorful, full of wild scribbles and tiny hearts. One showed a stick-figure family. A tall man, a woman with curly hair, and a little girl in the middle with a giant smile and a crown on her head. My throat closed up when I saw it. The closet door was ajar. Inside, her tiny shoes lined up like she'd be back any second to pick her favorite pair. A small dress, the yellow one with sunflowers, hung on the hook behind the door. The same dress I had folded the morning everything changed. I sat on the edge of her bed and picked up the storybook on her nightstand. It was still open to the last page we read together. I could hear her voice in my head, stumbling over the words, giggling when I did the animal voices. I hadn't realized how loud silence could be. I reached for the pillow and held it against my chest. It still smelled like her shampoo, the kind with the watermelon scent she picked out herself at the store, after insisting she wasn't a baby anymore. The weight of the room crushed me. Not in a sudden way. Not like the fire. But slow, steady, like every toy and sock and crayon had its own memory, each one pressing against my ribs until I couldn't breathe. I didn't cry. I just sat there, staring at the little pieces of her world, untouched and frozen. A room waiting for a child who would never come home. They stopped looking me in the eye after the first week. At the grocery store. At the pharmacy. At the bakery where I used to buy her favorite muffins every Friday. People who used to wave or smile now glanced down, stepped aside, spoke softer when I walked past. Like grief was contagious. They didn't say it out loud, not at first. But I heard them. Behind half-closed doors, in low murmurs on driveways, in texts that weren't meant for me. She's not the same. She hasn't shed a single tear in public. I heard she hasn't even cleaned out the room. Some said I was cold. Others said I was strong. Neither felt true. The worst ones whispered something else. That poor man. Imagine having to make that choice. At least he saved someone's child. He did what anyone would have done. As if that justified it. As if my daughter's life could be weighed against another and found lacking. Some even called him brave. A father who acted fast, who made a sacrifice no one should ever have to make. And I became the shadow of that story, the mother who didn't cry loud enough, who didn't smile when they praised him, who didn't stand beside him during the interview with the local paper. I couldn't. I didn't want to share space with a man who still hadn't said our daughter's name since the night she died. And yet, somehow it was me they pitted with clenched teeth. Me they watched like I was the one who'd walked out of the flames holding the wrong child. Even at the memorial it happened. Elise stood by him, hand lightly on his back, guiding him when he choked on words. I stood alone watching the white balloons drift into the sky, one for each child lost. I'd only written one name on mine. People clapped after his speech. I stayed silent. It was never about Elise. That's what I used to tell myself. Over and over. Like a mantra. Like if I said it enough I could believe it. That it was about fear. About instinct. About a man in a fire making an impossible decision. But it never sat right. Not in my chest. Not in the way he said her name. Not in the way he looked at her after the flames died down. So I went to see her. No warning. No message. I just stood outside her house on a Sunday morning, watching her daughter draw chalk shapes on the driveway. She had a braid in her hair. Just like mine used to wear. Just like I used to tie it before school. Elise opened the door before I knocked. She looked surprised. Maybe even guilty. But she didn't close it. I just want to talk, I said. One question. She nodded slowly, then stepped aside to let me in. The house smelled like fresh coffee and lavender. There were toys on the floor. A half-folded blanket on the couch. It felt lived in, untouched by the kind of grief that seeped into the walls of my own home. She poured tea, sat across from me, waited. Did he love her more? I asked. She didn't flinch. I expected her to say no, to fumble, to lie out of politeness. I would have accepted that. I would have let her pretend for both of us. But she didn't. She looked at me, her eyes heavy and honest. And then she said, "He never stopped." The words didn't sting the way I thought they would. They settled. I nodded once.
No tears. Nor hay.
Just a strange kind of stillness, like hearing the truth finally put something in its place. I thought maybe, I said, voice low, if I had just... No, she interrupted. It was never about you. We sat in silence for a while. Then I stood up. She walked me to the door, but neither of us said goodbye. Her daughter looked up and smiled as I passed. She had no idea who I was. No idea what was lost for her to be alive. And for the first time, I didn't feel anger when I looked at her. I just felt tired. The papers came a week after I visited Elise. I didn't wait for him to file. I printed them myself, signed every page in silence, and handed them to his lawyer without ceremony. There was nothing to negotiate. No property to divide that meant anything anymore.
No custody.
No fight. Just silence. When he got the papers, he didn't call. He didn't ask why. He didn't beg or argue. He just signed them. Maybe he was relieved. Maybe he knew the moment the fire touched our lives, the marriage had already burned with it. We didn't even meet to finalize it. It was handled by email. The funeral came first, of course. A week after the fire. Delayed because they needed time to confirm. What was left? I was the one who picked the casket. Small. White. The kind you never want to see because it's not supposed to exist. The funeral home director spoke gently, like he was afraid I might fall apart if his voice got too loud. I didn't cry. People expected I would. I could feel it in their eyes, like they were waiting for a performance of grief. But I just stood there, hands at my sides, watching the sunlight fall through the stained glass windows like it had no idea what kind of day it was. He sat 2 rows behind me. I didn't ask him to. I didn't tell him where to sit. We didn't speak. Elise didn't come. Only a handful of people did. Some family. Few friends. One of her teachers. Maya came and held my hand through the entire service. She didn't try to make me feel better. She just sat beside me, quiet and steady like the ground beneath my feet. The priest said her name wrong the first time. I corrected him. I read a poem I found tucked inside one of her storybooks, scrawled in crayon and barely legible. It didn't rhyme. It didn't make sense. But it was hers. I folded it and placed it with her before they closed the lid. There were flowers, music, a eulogy someone else wrote. But I didn't hear any of it. All I could think about was the way she used to dance around the kitchen in her socks, making up songs that had no melody. That's the version of her I held on to. Not the fire. Not the silence. Not the smoke. Just her voice, off-key and full of joy, echoing in a room that would never hear her again. There's a version of grief that's loud, raw and sharp and full of edges. People understand that kind. The sobbing kind. The kind that clings to gravestones and slams doors and begs for one more chance to go back. But this grief is different. It's quiet. A slow ache that slips into everything. Folding laundry. Walking past the toy aisle. Pouring 1 cup of juice instead of 2. It lives in the pauses. The stillness. I talk to her sometimes now. Out loud. Not like before, when I used to whisper her name as I tucked her in or hummed to her while brushing her hair. Now it's in the garden. While I water the flower she never got to see bloom. I tell her what's changed. What hasn't. What I'm still trying to understand. I planted sunflowers last week. The same ones that were printed on her favorite dress. They're still small, still reaching, but I watch them every morning through the kitchen window. They remind me of her. Always stretching toward the light, no matter how small she felt. The neighbors don't talk as much anymore. The whispers have faded. The headlines are gone. And Elise, I haven't seen her since that day. I don't think I ever will again. My ex-husband sent a letter last month. A short one. Typed cold, careful. He asked if I'd ever want to talk. I left it unread for a week before finally throwing it away. There's nothing left to say. He made a choice that day. So did I. Some mornings I wake up forgetting that she's gone, just for a second, and then it hits me soft but certain, like a ripple instead of a wave. That's what this grief feels like now, not drowning but drifting. I don't smile much, but when I do it's real. And small things bring it out. A child's laugh in the park, a bird tapping at the window, a wind chime catching the breeze just right. I don't chase happiness anymore. I wait for it like a bird I don't want to scare away. She would have been 6 this fall. I imagine what her voice would sound like now. Deeper maybe. Funnier. I imagine the questions she'd ask. The mess she'd make. The hugs she'd give without warning. I imagine it, but I don't live in it. Because this is a new kind of grief. The kind that doesn't just mourn who she was, but learns how to live with all the versions of her that never got to be.